My wife cheated on me with her boss, then stole $200, $0 from our joint account to run away with him. Now she's trying to claim half of everything in a messy custody and property battle. I never saw it coming. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, especially not after 10 years of marriage. Everything seemed fine on the surface. Jennifer was still the same bitchy, bossy woman I married, and I was content enough working my job, coming home to her, and pretending everything was perfect. But then, out of nowhere, my world flipped upside down in the most brutal way possible. It started with small things: missed calls, late nights she wouldn't explain, her phone buzzing constantly when she thought I wasn't looking. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was just stressed at work or dealing with some personal drama. But then I noticed her behavior changing more sharply. She was more secretive with her phone, deleting messages, making sure I didn't see her screen. She'd leave her phone face down on the nightstand, and if I tried to look, she'd snap at me, accuse me of snooping. One night I came home early from work, something I rarely did. The house was unusually quiet. I found her in the bedroom, sitting on the bed, her face pale, trying to hide her phone behind her back. I asked her what was going on, and she immediately got defensive, claiming she was just texting a friend. But I knew better. Something was off. That's when I saw it, an email open on her laptop, one from her boss, Mark. It was a simple email, but what caught my eye was the tone. It wasn't just professional talk, it was flirtatious. They were planning to meet up, and she signed off with a smiley face. My stomach sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. Jennifer was cheating on me with her boss, Mark, and I had no idea. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? Was I blind? Did I miss all the signs? I couldn't sleep that night, replaying everything, feeling betrayed and numb at the same time. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready. I just sat there, staring at the laptop, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. The next day I decided I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I waited until she came home from work, and I pulled her aside. I showed her the email. Her face twisted into a bitchy smirk, like she was surprised I'd found out, but also kind of proud of herself for hiding it so well. She everything at first, calling it a misunderstanding, saying Mark was just a friend she'd been talking to about work. But I wasn't stupid. I knew what I saw. She tried to lie her way out of it, saying I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, but I had proof. I had seen the messages, the calls, the late nights she'd been sneaking around. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. How could she do this? After all those years, all the promises, the memories we shared. It felt like she had been planning this behind my back the whole time. And then things got even worse. That same night, I found out she had stolen nearly $200, $0 from our joint account. I don't know how she managed it, but she took it all. Money we had saved for our future, for the kids' college, for our security. She was planning to run away with Mark, to start some new life with him, leaving me and the kids behind. That was the final straw. It wasn't just the betrayal of the affair. It was the betrayal of everything we built together. I was furious, shattered, and feeling so betrayed I couldn't breathe. I realized then that I couldn't trust her anymore, not with my heart or my money. I knew I had to figure out what to do next, but honestly, I was so overwhelmed I didn't even know where to start. All I knew was that my life had been turned upside down in a matter of days, and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to piece everything back together. After I found out about the affair and the money, everything changed in an instant. I went from a guy who thought he had a pretty normal, stable life to someone who felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. The betrayal cut so deep, I couldn't even process it right away. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how Jennifer, my wife, could do this to me after all these years. That night I sat alone in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. I kept thinking about the money, 200, gone. She took it all, planning to run away with Mark, her boss. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. Not just betrayed, but humiliated. How could she lie so blatantly? How could she steal from us? It was like she didn't even care about the damage she was causing, only about getting away with it. I decided I needed proof. I started digging through her phone, her email, her bank statements. I wanted to know everything, every detail, so I could decide what to do next. I found texts between her and Mark, flirty, sexual messages, even some explicit photos she'd sent him. They'd been planning this for a while. She'd been sneaking around, lying to my face, all while acting like everything was normal. It was at that moment I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. Not just because she cheated, but because she was a thief and a liar. I knew I had to get legal advice, but I also wanted to do something about it myself. I couldn't just sit around and let her walk away with everything. I had to protect myself and the kids. I started thinking about my options. I could file for divorce, but I also knew I needed to stop her from taking any more money or disappearing. I contacted a lawyer the next morning. The lawyer told me I had a case, especially with the evidence I had, her emails, texts, bank records showing the large withdrawal. The lawyer warned me that Jennifer was likely planning to claim half of everything, including custody, and that she'd probably try to spin it as she was just trying to start fresh, that she deserved her share after all the years we'd spent together. That's when I realized this was going to get messier than I thought. Jennifer was a manipulative woman, always good at twisting things to her advantage. She'd already lied about everything. She'd been bitchy and dismissive when I confronted her, insisting she was innocent, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I knew better. I had seen the evidence, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. In the following days, she started acting even more entitled, throwing tantrums, trying to gaslight me. She claimed she was the victim, that I was overreacting, that I was just jealous of her success at work. She said her affair was nothing, just some stupid mistake she'd made because she was stressed. But I knew the truth. I saw it. I felt it. I also learned she was trying to manipulate the kids, telling them I was the bad guy, making me out to be the one causing the drama. I was furious at how she was spinning everything. I didn't want my kids to grow up thinking their mother was some kind of victim or that her actions were okay. I wanted to be honest with them, but it was complicated. They loved her, and I didn't want to damage them with the truth if I could avoid it. Meanwhile, she kept trying to convince me to drop the case, saying she'd make it right, that she'd come back and fix everything. But I knew better. I wasn't stupid. She was only pretending to care now, because she realized she might lose everything: her marriage, her freedom, her money. She thought she could manipulate me into forgiving her, but I was done with her lies. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, and I didn't see any way out that didn't involve some serious consequences for her. I kept thinking about how she stole our savings, how she was willing to leave everything behind, our home, our life, the future we'd planned, and run off with her boss. It was like she'd thrown everything away just to be with him. I was angry at her, but I was also deeply hurt. I never thought I'd be the guy in this position, watching my wife betray me so blatantly, then try to manipulate her way out of it. What made it worse was the feeling of helplessness. I had no idea how to stop her from disappearing with the money or from claiming she deserved half of everything. I was furious, confused, and feeling more betrayed than I ever thought possible. All I could do now was wait, gather more evidence, and prepare myself for the storm that was coming. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, frantic calls, and trying to keep everything together for the sake of my kids. Jennifer, of course, played the victim at every turn. She'd call me crying, claiming I was unfair, that I was overreacting, and that she only loved me. She insisted she was innocent, that Mark was just a friend, and that I was paranoid. Honestly, I wanted to believe her, partly because facing the truth was too damn painful, and partly because I hated confrontation. But I couldn't ignore what I'd seen and found. She started throwing her weight around, trying to manipulate the situation. She'd threaten to take the kids away if I didn't back off, claiming I was trying to ruin her life. She'd spin stories about how I was controlling and jealous, trying to make me look like the bad guy. And sometimes she succeeded, at least temporarily. I'd get so mad, but then I'd remember the evidence, and that kept me grounded. One thing I couldn't ignore was the money. The lawyer confirmed that the $200, $0 she stole was a big problem. It wasn't just the amount, though that was huge. It was the fact that she'd planned to run away with it. I started to realize her entire story about how she just wanted a fresh start was bull. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. She was willing to destroy everything we built, our home, our savings, our family, just for this affair and her escape with Mark. I started to dig deeper into her financials. I found some strange transactions, small withdrawals that didn't add up, supposed gifts to Mark's account, and some untraceable cash withdrawals. It looked like she'd been planning to hide the money or at least make it hard to trace. I also discovered that she had opened a new bank account under a different name, which she was using to stash some of the cash. I felt sick thinking about how far she'd gone to cover her tracks. Meanwhile, she kept up her act of being the victim. She'd cry, scream, accuse me of being controlling, and say I was ruining her reputation. She painted herself as the wronged wife, the victim of a jealous husband who was just trying to keep her down. She even started throwing in some lies about her stress, her depression, and how she just needed a break. It was classic gaslighting, and I was falling for some of it because I didn't want to believe she was capable of such betrayal. But I knew better. I had the evidence. I knew she was lying, manipulating, and planning her escape. I was furious at her for doing this to us, for tearing apart the life we'd built. I felt betrayed, angry, and helpless all at once. The worst part was seeing how she was trying to turn everyone against me, friends, family, even the kids. She told them I was controlling, that I was suspicious of her for no reason. I didn't want to drag them into this mess, but I also knew I had to protect the truth. I started to think about what I was going to do next. I couldn't let her walk away with everything. Her lies, the money, the kids' future. I knew I needed to get a court order to freeze her accounts, especially the new one she'd opened. I also wanted custody of the kids, but I knew she'd fight that hard too. She'd try to manipulate the system, make herself look like the victim, and claim she deserved half of everything. The legal process was a nightmare. I felt like I was fighting a war I didn't fully understand. Every day she'd come up with some new excuse, some new lie trying to sway the story in her favor. I felt like I was losing my mind, but I stayed focused. I knew I had to be strong for my kids and for myself. I couldn't let her destroy us completely, no matter how much she wanted to believe she was the innocent victim in all this. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit alone and wonder how it all went so wrong. How a woman I'd trusted for years could turn out to be so selfish, so manipulative. I kept replaying the signs I missed, the little things I brushed off, her secretive phone habits, her excuses about work stress, the way she always wanted control. Now I saw it all clearly. She was planning her escape for a long time, and I was just the idiot who didn't see it coming. I knew I had to prepare for the worst. She was probably going to fight me tooth and nail to keep the money, to keep the kids, and to stay in the house. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd gather every piece of evidence I had, push through the legal process, and do whatever it took to protect what was left of our lives. Because at the end of the day, I realized I was fighting for more than just money or custody. I was fighting to save whatever was left of my dignity and sanity after all this chaos. The legal battle dragged on, and every day felt like I was walking through a minefield. Jennifer, true to form, didn't go quietly. She threw everything she had at me, more lies, more manipulations, even attempts to turn the kids against me. She'd call me controlling, accuse me of trying to trap her, and claim I was just jealous of her success at work. Honestly, I was too exhausted to argue most days. All I wanted was to get the truth out, to stop her from running away with our money, and to protect my kids from her toxicity. One of the worst moments was when I found out she'd been secretly trying to sell our house. I caught wind of it because she'd listed it under a fake name, trying to hide her plans. That's when I knew she was serious about disappearing. I went straight to my lawyer and we filed an emergency injunction. We managed to freeze the house sale and I demanded full financial disclosure. I was furious. She had already stolen so much, and now she was trying to wipe out any trace of what was left. While all this was happening, I started secretly recording her phone calls, her conversations when she thought I wasn't listening. I didn't want to do it, but I knew I had to have hard proof of her lies. The more she manipulated everyone around her, the more I realized I needed to document everything. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her movements. She was meeting Mark more often, staying out late, and even trying to open new accounts to hide money. Every piece of evidence painted a clearer picture. She was planning her escape and was willing to do anything to make it happen. The emotional toll was crushing. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. Every time I saw her bitchy smirk or heard her deny everything, I wanted to scream. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she turn our life into such a nightmare? The worst part was knowing she was still trying to manipulate the situation, telling the kids she was the victim, making herself look innocent, and painting me as the bad guy. I hated seeing her do that, but I knew I had to stay strong. Meanwhile, I was trying to keep my head above water. I was working extra hours, trying to keep some normalcy for the kids, and dealing with the constant stress of the legal fight. I'd sit up late at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever get my life back. I kept asking myself how someone I loved and trusted could do this to us. The betrayal felt like a punch to the stomach every single day. I also had to prepare emotionally for the worst, because I knew Jennifer wouldn't give up easily. She'd fight for her share of the house, for custody, and she'd try to spin her story to anyone who would listen. I was certain she'd present herself as the wronged wife, the one who was just trying to find happiness again, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her lies and I knew her manipulations. I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to trust her so blindly. For years, I thought we were solid, that we had a good life. But underneath it all, she was only thinking about herself, her affair, her money, her escape. I was just a pawn in her game. The hardest part was accepting that I might lose everything: my home, my family, my sense of stability. But I also knew I couldn't let her win. I had to fight for what was right, for what little dignity I had left. Every day now feels like a battle. I'm fighting to keep my kids safe, to keep what's ours, and to hold on to some shred of sanity. I've learned that trust is fragile and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. But I also learned that sometimes you have to stand up and fight, no matter how brutal the fight gets. Because if you don't, you risk losing everything you hold dear. The court hearings came and went in a blur of legal jargon, accusations, and endless paperwork. Jennifer's lies were starting to unravel under the weight of the evidence I'd collected: her secret accounts, the emails, the recordings. Still, she kept up her act, playing the victim every chance she got. She'd cry, scream, and try to manipulate the judge, claiming I was trying to control her, that I was jealous and paranoid. But I knew better. I had the proof, and I was determined to fight for my kids and what was ours. One of the most intense moments was when the judge ordered a forensic audit of our finances. It confirmed what I already knew: Jennifer had taken nearly all the money she could, and she was trying to hide the rest. She had opened new accounts, transferred funds, and even tried to sell our house without my knowledge. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because the truth was finally coming out, but anger because she had gone so far to destroy everything we built. Meanwhile, she was still insisting she deserved her fair share. She argued that after all these years, she was entitled to half of everything, including the money she stole. Her lawyer threw around legal terms like marital asset division, but I knew she was trying to spin the story to her advantage. I pushed back hard, showing the court all the evidence of her betrayal and theft. I also presented the recordings and bank statements, which painted a clear picture of her deception. The custody battle was just as brutal. She painted herself as the caring mother, trying to sway the judge with fake tears and sob stories. She claimed I was too controlling, that I was an unfit parent because I was harboring resentment and refusing to forgive her. I stayed quiet during those moments, knowing that my actions and the evidence spoke volumes. I wanted to be honest with the court but also protect my kids from her manipulations. I told the truth about her affair, her theft, and her lies. I knew I couldn't let her manipulate her way into full custody, especially not after the way she'd betrayed us. Throughout all this, I felt like I was barely holding it together. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, and every new revelation made it worse. I was angry at Mark, her boss, for getting involved in our lives and for enabling her to steal from us. I was angry at Jennifer for her selfishness. and lies. And I was angry at myself for trusting her so blindly for so long. But I also knew I had to stay strong for the kids, for myself, and for the truth. Some nights I'd lie awake thinking about everything we'd lost. The house, the savings, the respect I once had for her. The image of her smirking at me, lying through her teeth, haunted me. But I also realized something important. She'd shown her true colors, and I couldn't change her. All I could do was protect what was left of my life and try to rebuild from the wreckage. In the end, I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals the true nature of the people around you. Jennifer's actions prove she was willing to do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying everything we had. I learned the importance of being vigilant, trusting my instincts, and never letting myself be again. And most of all, I learned that sometimes the only way to truly move on is to face the pain head-on, hold onto your integrity, and fight for what's right. Because if you don't, you risk losing everything: your money, your family, your peace of mind. The final court date was the most exhausting day of my life. Everything had come to a head: her lies, her theft, the manipulations, and the betrayal. I sat there, watching her put on her best fake tears, trying to sway the judge with her sob stories about being the wronged wife and victim of my controlling ways. But I had the evidence, and I made sure it all came out. The recordings, the bank statements, the emails, every piece painted her as the manipulative, selfish woman she truly was. When the judge finally made the ruling, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. She was ordered to return the stolen money, and her attempts to sell the house or hide assets were declared invalid. Custody was awarded primarily to me, with supervised visits for her until she proved she could be a stable parent again. She looked furious and humiliated, but I didn't care. I'd fought for my kids, for my dignity, and for the truth. Looking back, I realized that this entire ordeal changed me forever. I learned the hard way that trusting blindly can be dangerous, and that sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest. But I also learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you pick yourself up afterward. I found my resilience in the chaos, and I made a choice to move forward, leaving the betrayal behind. Jennifer's attempt to claim half of everything, including the money she stole, failed. She's now trying to rebuild her life, but I know she'll never be the same. The trust is gone, replaced by a bitter reality that she chose her selfishness over her family. As for me, I'm focusing on healing, rebuilding, and making sure I never let someone manipulate or betray me like that again. The kids are safe, and I'm slowly finding my way back to some semblance of normalcy. I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a chance to start over, sometimes with a hard lesson behind you, but stronger than ever. I've come to accept that betrayal is part of life, but how you respond to it defines who you are. Moving on isn't easy, but it's necessary. And in the end, I realized that I am better off without the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal. I'm finally free to rebuild my life on my own terms, with honesty and integrity guiding the way.